Okay, so you guys sent us these audio clips, and wow,
Yeah.
these conversations between Sarah and John,
Yeah.
really, really interesting stuff. I mean, just like everyday English.
Yeah.
And our goal today is to sort of like, pick these apart, right?
Right.
Not just to, give you like a list of phrases, but to really like dig into what's going on,
Yeah.
under the surface kind of.
Like the subtle stuff, right? Like, why do they say it this way? What does it really
Yes,
mean?
exactly. Yeah, like, you can look up a word in the dictionary, but that doesn't tell you the whole story.
Right.
And I think that's what we really want to get at today. Like, how can you sound more
Yeah.
natural and really like,
Fluent.
fluent? Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit more about these clips. Where did they come from? What's the?
So this is actually from an English language learning podcast.
Okay.
And they do a really good job of like setting up these really natural sounding conversations.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at kind of like 4 main areas we cover.
Okay.
The first one is just like small talk and daily life,
Okay.
just those everyday chats.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll move on to ordering food at a restaurant.
Okay.
And this is something that, can be kind of stressful for people
Yeah.
when they're, in a new country or just
Yeah.
not used to speaking English in that situation.
You don't want to sound, like a
Yeah.
textbook or something you want to sound like.
Right. Like you belong.
Exactly.
Then we have talking about travel plans,
Okay.
which is always a fun topic.
Always.
And then finally, we'll look at some job interview practice.
Okay, so really like a whole spectrum of
Yeah, a good mix.
of different situations.
Exactly.
And I think what's so cool about this is, when you start to really get a feel for these different types of conversations, it's like you unlock this whole new level of confidence, right?
Absolutely.
It's not just about memorizing words, it's about, like you said, that fluency and understanding those unspoken rules almost.
Yeah, like, why a certain phrase just sounds right.
Yeah.
Or how to, be polite, but not too formal.
Yeah.
Things like that.
So are you ready to kind of dive into these?
Let's do it.
All right, let's start with the first one, Sarah and John's morning small talk.
Okay, so what's interesting right away is how much they actually convey in just a few sentences, right?
Yeah.
Sarah says she went for a short walk.
Yeah, short walk.
Now, on the surface, that seems pretty basic.
Yeah.
But think about what that adjective short is actually doing there.
It's doing a lot, isn't it? I mean, it creates this whole image in your mind.
Exactly.
Like it wasn't a 5-mile hike or something.
Yeah.
It was just like a quick little thing, maybe around the block or...
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, did she have other things planned for her morning?
Right.
Is that why it was short?
Exactly.
Yeah, we get this sense of her schedule, maybe?
And it's interesting, too, because, what's considered a short walk for one person might be like a really long walk for someone else.
Totally depends on your perspective, right?
Yeah. And even like culturally, in some cultures saying, I'm going for a short walk might actually mean like a really leisurely,
Right.
stroll that takes a couple hours or something.
Not always about the literal distance.
Yeah, exactly.
So then John chimes in and he's like, oh, man, my morning was so rushed, I totally slept through my alarm.
Oh, yeah, the classic alarm clock situation.
We've all been there.
We've all been there.
But that word rushed.
It's so powerful.
It is. It's not just about like moving quickly.
Right.
It's that feeling of like not having enough time, that pressure, maybe even a little bit of panic.
Yeah, like that sense of like, oh my God, I'm so behind.
Exactly.
And Sarah picks up on that right away.
Yeah, she's like, oh no, that sounds stressful.
Right? Like she understands that it's not just about, him like physically moving fast.
It's the emotional impact.
Yeah, it's like the whole experience of being rushed.
Exactly. And from a language perspective, it's interesting too, because rushed often has this slight negative connotation.
Yeah.
It's not always a positive thing to be rushed.
Right.
It suggests maybe you didn't have enough time to do things properly.
Or you were like, kind of flustered and
Yeah.
not at your best.
And they even play around with some variations, right? Like, I had a rushed morning or I was in a rush.
Yeah.
Oh, slightly different ways of expressing the same idea.
But you get the picture immediately.
Yeah, you know exactly what they're talking about.
And it's these subtle layers in the language, right?
Yeah.
That we really want to like unpack for you today, because that's what makes the difference between sounding like you're reading from a textbook
Right.
and sounding like a native speaker.
Totally.
So, okay, so we've kind of decoded a bit of morning small talk. What happens when we move on to something a little bit more, well, let's say specific?
Yeah.
Like ordering food.
Okay, so this is a situation where, having some key phrases ready can just be so helpful
Oh, yeah.
to just boost your confidence, right?
Yeah.
So here we have Sarah as the customer, and John is playing the waiter.
Okay.
And Sarah starts off with a really polite and standard phrase. She says, "Excuse me, can I see the menu, please?"
And that excuse me at the beginning is so important, isn't it?
It's small, but it makes a big difference.
Yeah. It shows that you're being considerate of the other person.
Exactly.
You're not just like barking out an order.
Right.
And John's response is really helpful too. Of course, here you go. Would you like a recommendation?
Yeah, that's such a great phrase to listen for because it's basically an invitation to ask for help
Right.
and to maybe discover something you wouldn't have tried otherwise.
I remember one time I was in this new city and I was looking at the menu and I was completely lost.
Yeah.
And the waiter was like, "Would you like some recommendations?" And I was like, "Yes, please."
Lifesaver.
I was so relieved.
And Sarah does exactly that. She says, "Yes, please. What's your most popular dish?"
Yeah, that's such a smart strategy because, if you feel like overwhelmed by all the choices,
Yeah.
you can just cut straight to like,
What do people actually like here?
yeah,
What's
exactly.
the good stuff?
And then when she makes her choice, she keeps it really simple and polite. She says, "That sounds delicious. I'll have that, please."
Perfect.
It's not, over the top. It's just,
Clear and concise.
yeah.
And then when John asks about drinks, Sarah says, "Yes, just a glass of water, please."
Again, very straightforward.
Yeah. And what I think is really key here is that they maintain this consistent level of politeness throughout the whole exchange.
Yeah.
It's those little phrases like, "Excuse me, please, thank you," that really make the interaction feel smooth and respectful.
And you know what I think that does is it takes away the anxiety that a lot of people feel when they're trying to order food in a foreign language.
Totally.
Because it's like you have this little script almost, and, you don't have to worry about saying the wrong thing.
And John even points out that you could also say, "Could I have the menu, please?"
Yeah.
Which is also perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, it's good to have those options.
Right. So you're not stuck with just one way of saying it.
So by just taking a close look at this little restaurant role play, you've already got like a whole set of phrases you can use
Yeah.
the next time you're out to eat.
And it's about building that toolkit, right? So
Yeah.
you feel more and more comfortable in these everyday situations.
So what's up next on our list of conversations?
Oh, yes, discussing future adventure travel plans.
This is where things start to get a little bit more person, right?
Yeah, people love to talk about travel.
They do.
So in this segment, Sarah and John are talking about John's upcoming trip to Japan.
Okay.
And Sarah starts off with a couple of general questions. She's like, "John, do you have any trips planned?"
Yeah.
And then she offers a slightly different way to ask, "Are you planning to travel soon?"
And those are both really good ways to kind of open up the conversation, right?
Yeah, it gives John the space to share something he's excited about.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Actually, yes, I'm planning to visit Japan next month. I've always wanted to see Tokyo and Kyoto."
I've always wanted to. That's such a great phrase.
It's so versatile.
Yeah, because it lets you talk about those dreams you've had for a long time.
Exactly.
And Sarah gives another great example. She says, "I've always wanted to learn how to play the guitar."
Yeah, you can use it for anything, really.
Yeah, it's like, "I've always wanted to learn a new language," or "I've
But-
always wanted to travel to Italy," or...
Yeah, it's a great way to express your aspirations.
And then they start talking about the details of the trip.
Yeah, John says he's traveling with a friend
Yeah.
and that they're looking forward to exploring the culture, trying Japanese food, and visiting historical sites.
So it's not just like, "I'm going to Japan."
Right. It's like, here's why I'm going, what I'm excited about.
Yeah, it makes the conversation so much more engaging.
Exactly. And it invites further questions and connection.
And it's interesting because you're not just learning how to ask about travel plans.
Right.
You're also learning how to talk about your own travel dreams.
Yeah. And how to provide those extra details that make the conversation more interesting.
So, okay, we've talked about small talk, we've talked about ordering food, we've talked about travel plans. Now it's time to shift gears a little bit and talk about something a bit more formal.
Yeah, let's talk about job interviews.
Okay.
This is where having some well-prepared phrases can really make a difference.
Oh, yeah.
Because you want to make a good impression.
Yeah. First impressions are everything.
They really are.
So in this segment, we have John playing the interviewer and Sarah is the applicant.
Okay.
And the interview kicks off with a very common question. Can you tell me a little about yourself?
Yeah, this is the classic icebreaker.
And Sarah's response is a fantastic example of how to give a concise and relevant overview of your experience.
Yeah, she nails it.
She says, "Of course, my name is Sarah, and I have 5 years of experience in marketing. I specialize in social media campaigns and digital advertising."
Boom, right to the point.
Yeah, no wasted words.
And she highlights her key skills.
And then John follows up with another classic question. Why do you want to work for our company?
This is where a lot of people stumble.
They do, because it's like, you don't want to just say like, "Oh, I need a job." You
Yeah.
want to show that you're genuinely interested in the company.
And Sarah does a great job of that.
Yeah, she says, "I admire your company's creativity and innovation in the marketing industry."
Yeah, that phrase right there, "I admire your company's creativity."
It's gold.
It shows enthusiasm.
Mm.
And John actually picks up on that later. He says, "I appreciate your enthusiasm for our work."
Right, so it clearly made an impact.
And Sarah continues, I believe my skills align well with your goals, and I'd love to contribute to your success.
So she's not just saying, like, I'm good at this.
Right.
She's saying, I'm good at this, and I can use my skills to help your company.
Exactly. She's making that connection.
And then, of course, we get to the inevitable question about strengths.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say are your strengths?
Since Sarah gives a really good list, I'm highly organized, creative, and a strong team player. I also have excellent problem-solving skills.
Those are all really valuable qualities in any workplace.
Absolutely.
And then the interview wraps up with some standard closing remarks.
Yeah, John says, we'll be in touch soon. Thank you for your time.
And Sarah says, thank you. I look forward to hearing from you.
So polite and professional.
It's all about ending on a positive note.
Exactly. And I think what's important to notice here is the overall level of formality in the language.
Yeah.
It's more structured than the casual conversations we looked at earlier.
Yeah.
It's still natural, but there's a sense of, professionalism.
And it gives you a really good model for how to conduct yourself in a job interview.
Right, because these kinds of interactions often follow a certain pattern.
Yeah, so it's helpful to kind of see that pattern play out.
And to understand the kind of language that's expected.
So I feel like we've really gone deep into these conversations, haven't we?
We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, from the simplicity of a short walk.
Yeah.
To the, more structured world of a job interview.
And everything in between.
Exactly. And we've uncovered some really valuable language and insights along the way.
Absolutely.
So let's just recap a bit for our listeners.
Okay.
We talked about how even simple adjectives like short can have a big impact on the meaning of a sentence.
Right. They paint a picture.
They do.
And we talked about how to confidently order food in a restaurant.
Yeah. Asking for recommendations using polite phrases.
Exactly. And we also explored useful expressions for talking about travel plans.
Both asking about them and sharing your own.
And of course, we delved into the world of job interviews.
Looking at those key questions and how to answer them effectively.
So hopefully our listeners are feeling a bit more equipped now.
Yeah.
To tackle these everyday situations.
Exactly. And as you think about all of this for you, our listener, consider this.
Okay.
What are some other everyday situations where you find yourself needing to communicate in English?
Yeah.
And how can you take these phrases and these principles of clear and polite communication and adapt them to those situations?
It's about taking these building blocks.
Yeah.
And making them your own.
Exactly. And with practice, you can start to build that confidence and fluency.
Absolutely.
And really start to own those everyday conversations. So keep practicing, keep listening, and most importantly, keep learning.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening.